Um, Hello, welcome back to the continuing lecture in simple discount. Uh, this is Dr. Jeff Hong, and you're looking at, I hope you're looking at the same file as I'm looking at. This is the Excel file we've been using. So in our last class, we basically defined what non-interest bearing promissory note is. There are two types of promissory notes: non-interest bearing, meaning paying no interest, and interest bearing, paying interest, of course. Now let's define a couple of symbols, right? First, B stands for bank discount, right? Bank discount. And FV here is actually what I called maturity value, right? FV is maturity value, actually. So maybe I can, but there's a reason why I left it as, FV, because in case of interest-bearing promissory note, the maturity value is the future value because it pays interest, right? If you borrowed $10,000 today at 10% interest rate, that means you issued promissory note. You issued a promissory note for $10,000 at 10% interest rate, right? So 1 year later, you owe, right, $11,000, right? So that's the future value, right? As well as the maturity value, because at maturity, that's what you pay, right? That's what you owe. But, with that in mind, now think about it. D is the discount rate, right? And T is time. So just like in our example last time, if it is non-interest bearing, this is wrong. In a non-interest bearing case of non-interest bearing note, I'm sorry, this one was, I don't know, I was probably just too tired and even didn't notice the arrow I made here. But in case of a non-interest bearing note, the maturity value is the same thing as principal. But in case of interest bearing note, maturity value is the same thing as the future value. But here, what I wrote here is actually this looks crazy. I am so sorry, and it just skipped my mind. Why? And sometimes when I play back the recordings that I made, I was just so caught up in talking, and you're completely unaware that you are blurting out something that you don't mean. But those things, if you spot those things, in the discussion board, just ask me, if you are not clear. Oh, professor, you said this, but in the previous class or previous video, but I think that was the opposite. If you ask questions, in the discussion board, I will clear it out. And as a matter of fact, what I discussed here, think about it. If you do this, principal times R times T, this is only interest, isn't it right? This is only interest. So actually what I did here is finding the future value. In other words, future value is the maturity value. That's what I wanted to say. Um, so actually, what I should have written here was maturity value is, I try to say, was P times 1 plus R times T. Okay, that's what I meant to say, which is, in other words, future value, right? And I realized that you know, I was, I was all along. I was saying, basically, which one is the preferred, payment method for the uh, buyer, and which one is the preferred payment method for the seller. And what I meant was seller prefers always the cash, and for the seller, um, the least preferred payment uh, method or payment mode is the promissory note. And for the buyer, it's vice versa. For the buyer, most preferred payment mode is the promissory note, and uh, the least preferred mode is the cash. But although this was what I was trying to say, and I was saying that, and then somewhere along the way, uh, it's like getting tongue-tied, or your when your mind is racing ahead, your mind is racing ahead, your mouth and your tongue. Then your mind is always already like 10 steps ahead, 20 steps ahead, and your mouth is just blurting out anything, right? So I'm so sorry about those uh, uh, you know uh, mistakes I made uh, in the previous video. So at this time, we are back. We are now defining, the symbols in the non-interest-bearing promissory note. So, so B is basically it's called bank discount. Bank discount is like the when the bank is buying this promissory note, this is what they take for their own cut. So this is like the interest that the bank takes, right? Up front. Why? Because they will pay you money. They will give you the, as I said, if your client gave you $10,000 promissory note with 60 days maturity, right? And if you hold on to it for 60 days, you present it to the issuer and receive $10,000. So there's no interest, and nobody will be happy to receive uh, zero interest paying, non-interest paying promissory note that will mature in 60 days. And if your company isn't going through a cash flow shortage situation, then this won't be a problem. But since this is a problem if your company is going through cash flow shortage, so you take it to the bank, and the bank will pay you something, but they are not going to pay you $10,000. That's the idea behind this, right? I'm repeating this over and over um, every lecture about the simple discount. So this should already sink into your mind. Now, So they will pay you something like, $9,000. If they pay you $9,000, what does that mean? They discounted this promissory note by 10%, right? That 10, so they took 1K from this, and that 10% is called the discount rate, okay? And that time, I mean, if it is for 60 days, right? So that's 10K times 10% times 60 over 360, right? So this is, in a way, if you think about it, there's a parallel between interest and bank discount, because interest is P times R times T, P times R times T. Now think about this. In case of promissory note, zero coupon or zero interest bearing, non-interest paying promissory note, this is exactly P, isn't that right? This is exactly P. So the only difference is that in this case, this interest is added to the principal, right? This interest is added to the principal, right? And then that's the future value. But in simple discount is also called bank discount. And in case of simple discount, this mouse is just, the mouse has mind of its own. And think about it. If this is what the bank takes, what is left for you is P minus B. Isn't that right? It's P minus B. So that's called proceeds. Okay, that's called. Did I write proceeds somewhere? I don't see proceeds. Okay, so P is, D is called proceeds. So this is what you receive from the bank. Okay. D is this, lowercase d is the discount rate. Uppercase D is proceeds. Now, so if you rewrite a D by definition, right? D is the first of all, if I this FV, which is also maturity value, but in this case, because it is not paying any interest, maturity value is the same thing as the principal, right? And then B is by definition what? P times dt, right? P times dt. So you factor out the common factor, it becomes P times 1 minus dt. Or what is, if it is interest paying promissory note, what is this? It's MV, right? Or future value, right? Maturity value times 1 minus dt, okay? Now, please, make it very clear in your mind that FV and MV are the same thing, right? Maturity value is the future value. But think about it. If the note pays any interest, then maturity value is the future value. But if the note doesn't pay any interest, then the maturity value is exactly the principal, right? So now, with that in mind, let's go to this example. Okay, let's go to this example. So first, $200 is the principal. 5% is the discount rate. Time is 2 years. So then what is the proceeds? The proceeds are then, P times 1 minus E times T. Okay? And there you go. So what does this mean? This is what you receive from the bank, right? This is the proceeds from the sale of the note, non-interest paying note. And what is the bank discount? In other words, what's the bank's cut? What does the bank take? It's the difference between the two in this case, right? Makes sense. Of course, we can calculate B first, right? Now, here, the process is perfect. I mean, what we are doing is, perfectly, correct. But there is something I have a problem with. What is the problem? It's time. Why? Time is 2 years, right? But then you understand everything is, short term as far as we are using simple interest rate, right? As long as we use simple interest rate and using simple discount, this is just hypothetical. This is just an example for exercise, right? For practice. So in reality, you won't see maturity like this. And then, well, I already converted everything into years, but second problem, 5,000, principal is 5,000, discount rate 8%, time 90 days. So we converted into what's going on? We converted into years, right? And ordinary, always, unless otherwise specified, right? Ordinary is the default, right? I put on. So what is the proceeds and the bank discount? Now, we don't have to do it again. We do it exactly like, first row, I mean, row 12. So you can just copy and drag it down. There you go. You might, and then you say, oh, can I copy and drag it down? No. Why not? Because row 14, what is the primary solution cell? The primary solution cell is, the main solution cell is this, not this, right? So you remember that all yellow highlights mean primary solution cell. So here, this one, all you need to do is, then we know what to do. This is simply principal times D, discount rate, times T. Okay, and then the D is proceeds is the difference between the two, right? Okay, there you go. Now this one, Okay, this is finding principal, right? This is the solution cell. So, and here, same 270 days, but when you convert it into year, it's different. So what does that mean? That means for this one, it's it's exact interest year. So then our next question, so how do we solve for principal? You remember what we did with interest? Remember that? Um, so I guess I'll have to use this space. So when you, with that, if P is the unknown, what is that? I over R times T. And if R is the unknown, what do you do? I over P times T, and so on, right? Also, if T is the unknown, right? You know how to do that. So apply, it's the same logic because B is P times or MV times dt, right? Let me erase this. I should have put it there. So if that's the case, right? If that's the case, P is, because think about it, starting from, I'll have to use this space. Starting from B equals MV, you should be flexible enough to, in your mind, you should be flexible enough to replace this with P, right? Or FV, right? So if that's the case, then P, or the maturity value, in this case, maturity value is the exactly P, right? Or P, right, in this case. What do? Then you do B over, right, D times T, right? And think about it. Also, if D is the unknown, D equals B over P times T, or, it's all, so here, all you, I'll have to come back. So then what? Then there's one more question, right? We need to use B, but we don't know what B is. This is a problem. But also, we can find this because another formula is what? I mean, if D is right, so D is, what? D equals mv over 1 minus dt, right? So what do you need to do? It's simple, right? So also, maturity value, or P, I'll do that later. I'll take care of it. As d over 1 minus dt. Okay, so this is how you find principal or maturity value, right? When you know B, this is how you find it when you know D. So this is very basic math, basic algebra, not a big deal. All righty, so what is the principal? D over, right? 1 minus D times T, okay? And then what about this? You cannot just drag it down because the input variables are different, right? So here in this case, the principal is B divided by D times T. I guess in this example, they used ordinary interest here because 180 days or 180 days to be exactly half year, right? The 1 year has to be then 360, not 365. Anyway, you get that. Well, there you go. And by also, you can, something like this, it may not be easy to mentally check, but something like this, when the numbers are, when all the input variables are round numbers, you can easily check mentally, right? What that means is, look, if it is $20,000 and 10% is the interest rate, right, or discount rate, for the whole year, what should be the bank discount? For the whole year, it would have to be 10% of this, which is, 10% of this, which is, then 2,000, right? But it is only half year, so the bank discount or interest has to be half of that, 1,000. This already, just conforms to a common sense, right? It doesn't take, very sophisticated uh, procedure. Just mental. This is very, basic critical thinking, and also, deductive reasoning. Um, so you are uh, making you can, check and confirm, verify, very easily. Now, next, we are going to discounting interest-bearing notes, but before we go to that, let me, I guess, it will take some time to do this. I mean, it's just an extension of this, so it's not that difficult, but we don't have enough time for that, so it will have to be the next video. But before we go, let me explain. There are two types of factoring. One is factoring with recourse. The other one is factoring without recourse. Recourse means you have something to fall back on, right? Some support. Factoring without recourse, there's no support. So what does that mean? Factoring with recourse is the seller, in other words, the one who brings the promissory note to the bank. Seller pays the bank if the issuer of the promissory note does not pay. Well, normally this won't happen that very often. Why? It's mostly factoring without recourse. Why? Um, Seller does not pay the bank if the customer, the note issuer does not pay, right? So think about it. What kind of issuer would default? They would be the ones with very, very, very low credit rating, derogatory credit rating. So if the company with, if I'm dealing with a client that has very bad credit rating, I'm not going to accept their promissory note, right? And if the only way they can make me, accept the promissory note is only if they pay very high interest, right? Uh, Enough to cover for that risk. But then, uh, if and if I take it to the bank also knows that this is a very iffy company, right? Very iffy, very, uh, uh, you know, highly, uh, default probable company. So the bank is not likely to accept it either. The only way the bank is going to accept it is by discounting it also very, very deeply, right? Discounting it very, very deeply. They also need to cover for their risk, right? So usually it is factoring without recourse, but if they don't discount it deeply, then and if the note issuer defaults, then uh, where do they collect the money from? And they will have to come to you to collect the money, right? So that's factoring with recourse. Okay. Um, so that's it for this video. I will see you. I will sign off and see you guys in the next video. Stop recording.